I'm Aviva Burnstock, and this is Austin Nevin, and together we're going to introduce you to some of the activities that go on in the conservation department at the Courtauld. So we've prepared a presentation, and we're going to talk you through the kinds of activities that are done mainly by students in the department, the kind of things that students on the different conservation courses do. We hope that will be interesting for people who might want to study at the Courtauld, doing conservation, or people who are interested in the kind of things we do in a more general way. Here we go.
Yes, well, thank you, Eva. Welcome, everybody. I'm Austin Nevin, head of the Department of Conservation here at the Courtauld. And as Aviva said, I think we're all pretty zoomed out at this point, but it's really nice to see over 70 people, 71 in fact, with us today. And at the beginning of this presentation, Aviva and I will go back and forth describing some of the activities that we do. And then each one of us will take turns describing two of the master's degrees that we have in conservation, first in the conservation of wall paintings and then the conservation of easel paintings. As I said, we're very welcome here, and I hope that you write down or think about your questions, because we have time at the end of the presentation to answer some of them. So I'll pass over to Aviva for the first slide about the Department of Conservation. See if I can advance the screen. Can I do that? Yes, I can. There we go.
So this is the Department of Conservation that is at at Vernon Square at the moment, in our temporary accommodation. And I think the next slide might even show us how it looks in a more general way. So normally we're based at Somerset House, and at the moment the department's being renovated, as is the gallery. The gallery is going to reopen in November, and we're going to move back in about a year's time. But at the moment we're at Vernon Square, which is actually quite nice accommodation. So I've shown you some pictures of the outside at Vernon Square, and the other images I'm going to show you of what it looks like inside the department. Of course, during COVID, we've not been able to allow visitors in, but we have been operating here for students, because obviously a lot of what we do is practical and students actually have to be in the studio. So we've been managing to do that in a socially distanced way, and I'm going to show you some pictures of what that looks like. And then the other images is what it's going to look like when we move back to Somerset House, which is of course a fantastic place to be, right near the gallery, right near other galleries, which is incredibly important for what we do. So maybe the next slide. So just to give you a tiny bit of history, so the Courtauld was set up in 1932, and the department was open as a technology department. Initially, it was a Department of Conservation and Technology, but without the conservation, just the technology part. So it looked at technical studies of paintings to inform historical questions. And in fact, we still do that sort of work. And I haven't included many slides of it, but we do offer a service here where we examine pictures for different sorts of technical art historical questions to see if we can provide evidence. And as part of that, I've also been involved in this Fake or Fortune, this BBC series, which some of you might have seen, or it's about how you can, well, their focus is on attribution of paintings, but how technical studies can help with that, or provide information about how pictures are made or how they've changed. So that kind of work's been going on at the Courtauld for a very long time. And the actual conservation part of the study started in the 70s. And we had a formal course in the middle of the 70s, a 3-year course. And then the wall painting conservation course began in 1985. And it's been a 3-year postgraduate diploma, and we're going to have a master's course from next year. Next slide.
As Aviva said, we have actually got 4 different master's degrees starting in 2022. So for applications for next year, for those of you amongst us who are interested in applying, 2 of them last for 3 years, the master's in wall painting conservation and the master's in easel painting conservation. That's 3 years full-time in the studio and on site. A big commitment, but it does lead to a qualification which will allow you to enter the profession. And we have 2 other programs, which are 1-year programs on either technical art history, modern and contemporary painting, or an MA in Buddhist art history and conservation, which is geared not as much to practical conservation, but rather to ethical and principles of conservation and the art history related to Buddhist sites. But we're going to be focusing mostly today on the first two courses, which are kind of the core activity of the department. Now, I'm going to talk a moment about the MA in wall painting conservation. This is actually quite a unique program, and it's the only one of its kind in the UK or the United States. And it has a specific focus on wall paintings. And this is something which is quite important because most courses that you can study in Europe and abroad do not have a specific focus on wall paintings. You're often asked to study mosaics, wall painting, stone, and other things. Instead, the Courtauld, we focus only on wall paintings in this MA, and it's based on a holistic approach. And I think that's quite common in conservation. We want students to learn both about art history and technical study, as well as preventive and practical applications in wall paintings. We teach at the Courtauld, in the studios and in the laboratories with the kinds of equipment that you saw in the previous slides, but also with new equipment that has recently entered the department. And we also work internationally and in the UK on wall painting sites. And about half the time in your first year and increasing amounts of time in your second and third year would be spent on sites, actually working and getting a practical experience. And another component, which is common to all the MAs at the Courtauld, is the independent research that you carry out as part of the third year project in the wall paintings and easel paintings MAs. Now, here are some images of sites where students have worked, and we have worked in Bhutan, in Malta, and in India. And you see here students applying different methods for the examination of the paintings themselves. The photography of the paintings on the upper left-hand side, the on-site work, which involves management as well as work on scaffolding. So if you're scared of heights, you might not want to study wall painting conservation, as well here at the bottom with students and scientists examining the surface of paintings with portable techniques. And we also have an image of students examining the thermal properties of the walls with equipment that is used to understand the temperature of the walls, to understand better how it is that they are diffusing radiation. And I'm going to show you another site where we worked in Malta to highlight the approach and one of the reasons that it's necessary to study wall paintings in such depth. This is a wall painting by Filippo Palladini, and it was severely damaged in the bombing of Malta. And you can see in the Second World War, and you can see here the surface of the painting, which has been covered with tickets or pieces of paper, which are actually lottery tickets, to try to stabilize it and stop it from falling off the wall. And indeed, the stability of wall paintings is one of the biggest issues that we face. The fact that wall paintings are on walls which are cracked sometimes and can actually come off. And we try to address that problem of stability in much of the work that we do. And here you can see an image which we took with a light source which is called Raking Light, where rather than an image that you take straight on, we try to see all the wrinkles in this wall and highlight the surface features of the painting. You can see both the stone surface, if I get my pointer going, the stone here underneath the painting, and you can see the stones poking through, as well as the very uneven surface of this painting, which is very typical of a large wall painting. This wall painting is probably about as big as my entire flat. I'm sorry, that's my doorbell, but that's nothing for you. And here you see instead the area of the wall, a map of the wall, where we have highlighted the presence of different surfaces which have actually come off which have become detached. We have very large detachments on one area and other areas of the wall painting which are much flatter. And these are quite extensive. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to get that. If you just wait just 1 second, I'll be back.
I would like to be able to talk about wall paintings, but I should tell you, I'll fill in here that I'm an easel paintings conservator. Here he is, he's back again.
I'm sorry, that was my children probably needing a potty break. So here we are, and we can see the surface, which is very, very complicated. And the reason we have to carry out this mapping is that we need to understand how to plan the treatment, how to plan a treatment of a surface, which you can see at the bottom of this screen is meters in size, meters wide, meters tall, and these areas of loss are very, very large. And there are no kind of off-the-shelf solutions for this. We actually had to do the mapping, the testing and the implementation of the solutions that we discovered and we were able to develop as part of a very, very significant project, which was sponsored together by the Getty Conservation Institute and the Valletta Rehabilitation Project in Malta. We can see that about 120 square meters, as I said, that's about 3 times the size of my flat, were separated from the surface of the wall. That's huge. And in some areas, it was as much as 4 centimeters. But how is it that we could, what solutions do we have available? How can we test them? How can we implement them on site? These are big questions which require quite a bit of research. And here we can see an example of the removal of one of these lottery tickets, which had to be done very, very carefully. Because remember, these lottery tickets were adhering a painting, which had actually become detached in some areas as much as this, about the size of a Cadbury chocolate bar. It's quite large. And you can see underneath, though, that the painting is in good condition on the surface, but we know that behind that painting, there are areas of air. And here we can see at the end of the treatment, the fact that we can actually restore a lot of the original. We have areas here which it was decided not to reintegrate them, to repaint them, because they're actually gone. But a lot of this painting is now legible the way it was not before the treatment. And the reason I show you this example is that it required significant kind of practical testing, materials testing and materials evaluation, both at the Courtauld and Somerset House in London, as well as on site by conservators and by students. It's a real success story of a treatment which otherwise would not have been possible. We don't just work in Malta and in the UK, but we also have significant projects in India. This is an example of some fabulous paintings in Rajasthan in Bundi, where the Courtauld went to examine the ceiling paintings and the wall paintings, which are quite spectacular. And some of the work that we did highlighted the presence of organic yellow pigments, for example, Indian yellow, a rather strange pigment. You can look about it on Wikipedia, which was used and it fluoresces very strongly in UV light. And you can, I think, appreciate the scale and beauty of these paintings. But you can also see that some of the areas are actually damaged because of aging, damaged because of use, and damaged also because of the fact that these paintings are in a desert, which has a lot of dust, and we also have monsoons. And here we can see examples of treatments by students as part of the course. We have on the left-hand side a site in Malta, which a ceiling painting, which was heavily damaged by not only the infiltration of water, but also the application of a varnish, which was really tricky to remove. And thankfully, Aviva came and helped figure out a way to remove this kind of sticky oil resin varnish from the surface of the painting. But sometimes we have dirt to remove that you can see on the top right, dirt and dust. And dirt and dust is actually, it is a conservation problem, because as dirt and dust accumulates, it can then become solidified and it can become intractable and more difficult to remove. So it is actually important to clean the surfaces. But to do that selectively and carefully, you can see a student here applying a poultice to the surface to remove along the lines of the contours of the painting, the dust. We can also see the treatment of wall paintings from China on the bottom left, where a student is adhering applying an adhesive to reattach some flaking in I believe in Dunhuang, and here on the right hand side, a treatment again of a large crack in the painting. And this really demonstrates to you that the treatment of wall paintings is quite complicated. We have everything from structural treatment to surface treatments to the application of adhesives and the removal of varnishes. So it's actually very, very exciting, but also quite challenging. Another aspect of the work that we do is close looking and examination to understand how it is that paintings were actually made. And remember that we have manuals and we have pigments and tubes we can buy now, but that was not always the case. So the making of paintings and the understanding of the technology that Aviva mentioned at the beginning is a key aspect of the work that we do at the Courtauld. And here's an example of an image of a wall painting, Himalayan wall painting, and you can see the fine lines on the face of this figure, but also the beautiful gilding, which is this yellow paint, which was applied very, very carefully. That was sheets of gold, or also flake gold. And here we can see an examination of an area of this painting, instead in and I believe this is from Bundi, where we have a gilded decoration. You can see that closer up here. And a very, very small sample from this, along the crack of this painting, reveals that this is made up of multiple layers of paint. And through the combination of visual examination as well as microscopic analysis that we can do at the Courtauld, we're able to identify each layer and the different pigments that are present. And sometimes we have questions we can't answer, like what binding media is present, or why it is the paint is degrading. And then we go to colleagues and we ask for help to try to identify, for example, if it's animal glue, or perhaps milk, or perhaps egg, or a combination of those and oils. And we can ask those questions and hopefully come up with an answer. And if you want to see some of the work that we do in Longthorpe Tower, you can go on YouTube, and there's a really nice video of conservation work which we have been carrying out together with English Heritage. So if you were to join the program in 2022, this would probably be one of the sites you would work at least at the beginning. And the issues with Longthorpe Tower are significant because it has been treated in the past, and some of the materials that were used in the past now need to be removed and replaced. This is an extremely important medieval wall painting scheme, not so far away from London, but very, very important for the history of wall paintings, which is another focus of the department. So I'd suggest that you go on YouTube and take a look at this video if you're interested. And now I'm going to pass over to Aviva, who is going to talk to you about the easel painting conservation MA.
Do you, it's okay if you, shall I just ask you to flip the slides when the time comes? That's fine, that's good. Okay, so Austin's described the most fantastic wall paintings projects, and I have had the privilege occasionally of being involved when there's varnish on the picture. But I will talk to you about the Masters in Easel Painting Conservation, which involves conservation of paintings on a smaller scale, portable paintings, so things that can be moved around. So they're normally on canvas or on wooden supports. Sometimes they're on other things like metal supports, copper perhaps, or sometimes on paper, so paintings on paper. Although we aren't specialized in paper conservation, we are on easel painting. So there are many things that we have in common with wall paintings conservation, but main difference is that we don't go on site so often, unless we have to. We can't move the paintings. We generally work in the studio at the Courtauld, so it's a more indoor activity. And yeah, that's it. So the paintings come to us, more or less. Although obviously the education involves professional education, which will also involve doing loan checking for international. So you have to learn how to do courier trips and how the international work, how international exhibitions work. It's all part of being a conservator, preventive conservation. So not just engaging in restoring things hands-on, but also how to prevent things deteriorating. And a big part of that, in the same way as easel paintings, is diagnostic. So we do technical analysis of pictures so that we can understand how they're made and how they've changed, and also the kinds of interventions or additions that might have happened to them along the way, so that we can make some good decisions about how they should be represented. But of course, nothing is the same as it was painted long ago. So things change, as you know, everything changes, things deteriorate. Some things deteriorate more than others. So we need to know all this before we make conservation decisions. And that's a big part of what we do. Next slide. We, of course, are closely linked with the Courtauld Gallery and the Gallery Conservator. So we are the conservation department for the Courtauld Gallery, which is of course fantastic and has a fantastic collection of old master and modern pictures from the 20th century. So we have those paintings in the department. We are able to study them technically and to engage in art historical research with other members of the academic staff and the curators of the gallery, which is a big part of what we do. So we have that, but we also take on work from heritage organisations like Heritage England, English Heritage, the National Trust, small museums and galleries around the UK, sometimes international museums. So we have paintings from those places too that are worked on by staff and students in the studios. So it's a kind of rich environment to work as an easel painting conservator or to train. We don't just do mock-ups and work on awful pictures. We work on real pictures, top drawer pictures from important collections. And I think that's a really important thing to do. Next slide. So this is what it looks like. It's a 3-year course, as Austin mentioned, both courses are 3 years, and there will be overlap between walls and easels, especially in the technical examination part, where there are a lot of similar techniques that are used to analyze pigments, look at layers, and look at deterioration. So those things, wall painting students, but we have 5 students a year, so it's a really small number of students working together collaboratively and individually on paintings in the studios. So it's a very practical based in the same way as wall painting conservation. So it's a combination of theory and practice. Most of the theory comes in the first year, so you have a sort of basis for different elements of the course. And then there's a big element of studio work. This is just to show you what it looks like in the studios. Keep going, next slide. So the first thing that's really important to know is that students quite often come from different sorts of backgrounds. So they may come from science backgrounds, as I did, and Austin too. And so we didn't know much about the history of art, apart from looking at things in galleries and around the world. And so those students who come in with that sort of background have to learn about that. And also, I think all students, whether they've done art history degrees or a different sort of degree beforehand, need to know and understand how paintings are made and how they change. So one of the first things we do is to, and this is a picture of students doing it, is to make replicas of gallery pictures from different periods. And to do that, you need to know about the materials. Sometimes we make the pigments themselves and we use those pigments, make them in the lab. And we read about painting technique, because there's now quite a big literature on that. And we can look also at early treatises, which describes how artists work, and make replicas of paintings from different periods. So we have a sense of what it takes to make a work of art and how different it looks when it's first made to the way we see it now. Next slide. I thought I'd just show you a couple of slides. I hope you can see this. We've had to work socially distanced for the last year and a half, and we've really tried hard to keep studios open, but to also do it safely. So I thought I'd show you this picture of our first year students working with masks on and socially distanced, and we've been through all this, but we have managed to carry on nonetheless. But hopefully this sort of arrangement won't happen all the time and we'll be back together again. So this is a picture of us copying a painting by the master of the Fog Pietà. And in fact, that was a project Austin and I got very involved with members of the academic staff. And we traveled around America and Europe looking at paintings related to an altarpiece at the Fog Art Museum of the Fog Pietà. It was a really fantastic international research project. Anyway, so this is a gallery picture, so predella panel of St. Lawrence. And in this case, the students were copying this picture. So we have the actual picture in the studio, and they're able to do all the different techniques. So that could involve, gessoing a wooden panel, painting out the bowl, and doing the gilding and the punching that you can see. And I've just put here, the technique is based on Cennino Cennini, a book which was published in 1390. So we're able to consult that. So what was said to have been used, we can compare it to what was actually used for the painting. And you can see here a detail from the painting showing how it's cracked. It wouldn't have been cracked when it was first made. It's nice and shiny new gold on the replica. So next slide. So technical examination documentation is something that students all do here, and we have a big emphasis on that, and we have state-of-the-art equipment, thanks to Austin, which we've recently got. So we're able to do different sorts of analysis and scanning paintings for their elements, so identifying pigments, looking at how the composition's laid out, using infrared, ultraviolet light, fluorescence characteristics, and we are involved in our own research in developing new ways for looking at pictures and identifying painting materials, which is a big area of interest of both Austin and I and other people in the department who have particular other areas of interest. So we teach students to do microscopy, and we all do it. And they also learn how to do quite sophisticated new analytical methods to look at works of art. Next slide. So just a couple of examples of student treatment projects. Looking at the time, I'm not going to go on too long. I really hope that you ask lots of questions about any of this. So just to give you an example of a project that we did, which was on a particularly interesting painting. This is students working on a painting, an individual student working on this. So it's a painting made from a Flemish painting, which looks like a regular painting from the surface, painted in the 17th century. But you can see in the infrared image on the left and the X-ray on the right, there's got this big addition in the corner. And that's because the painting, as we discovered, was originally a harpsichord lid. So this is the lid of a harpsichord, which is painted on the back and the front. And in the X-ray, you can see actually bits of what's painted on the back. I haven't showed you an image of that. But anyway, this addition, when the painting was cleaned, and this shows the picture when it was very yellow, it had a coating of yellow varnish, which we took off. And when it was cleaned, the difference between the addition, which happened a century later, to make it into a square rectangular format so it could be shown as an easel painting, which happened to a lot of harpsichord lids, looked really different. So the whole corner looked very different to the harpsichord lid shaped original part, this part here. So the student had to make a proposal as to how to reintegrate the image so that it looks visually like a painting, which it had become, but only 100 years after it was made. But also respecting the fact that these changes had happened. And so looking at how you do that was part of what students do. And it's kind of fascinating. Students make proposals and arguments for how treatments should be made, and then they carry out the treatments. So it's a very professional working environment. So next slide. And I just thought I'd show you just like another example. We work on paintings on canvas. This is, it's called Finding Hope. So we had the opportunity to look at a whole series of virtues from the Ashmolean Museum collection. And one of them was recently found rolled up, this one here, and we've recently conserved it. The image I'm showing you here is of our lining table. So we were able to do structural treatment of the canvas, which had been rolled up, and you can see it's got all the kind of paint loss around the edge and rollings up. It's very yellow, so we were cleaning the painting. And we've just recently relined it because the canvas was completely degraded, and removed the very dark brown varnish so that it will sit with these other virtues at the Ashmolean Museum when it was completed. So it was an amazing discovery, rolled up in the store, of the seventh virtue, who is hope. So Finding Hope is what I've called this one. So students are involved in both aesthetic, so cleaning type treatments, but also in structural treatments. So every element or every aspect of a painting's material structure is dealt with. Next slide. So of course we can't, in 3 years, you can't restore every type of picture with every type of problem. So working in groups and sharing information is really important. And also having the opportunity for specialist lectures and workshops and visits to other places where they restore pictures in different ways or have different approaches to things. And we'll have, this is an example of a cleaning workshop, which I do every year, where we look at all different sorts of methods for removing coatings and other materials from paintings, because obviously that's a very sensitive and tricky thing to do. And so there are a whole lot, there's always new research in this area. And what we try to do is keep people up to date with the kinds of research that's done in the field so that they can then apply it in their own practice. Next slide. So we educate people not just to work in the UK, but to be able to work in different places in the world. And what is easy to understand is that in different places of the world, different art collections have different approaches to conservation. So it's really important to keep an open mind about the kind of decision making that's done in different places, so that you could go and work in any museum in the world and have an understanding of the framework of reference for making decisions, at least. So an important part of our course is to have international exchanges, to be able to go and visit courses abroad. Or recently we've had incredible visits and contributions from people internationally, mainly from alumni actually. So wherever they are, it could be in the Middle East or America or Australia, New Zealand, Europe, of course. So having collaborations with people internationally is a very important part of what we do, and also where possible to visit those places. So we visit every year leading centres for conservation and conservation education. Here's a few more examples. So we've been all over in the 30 years that I've been working at the Courtauld, to just about everywhere, including the States on one occasion when we had enough funding. But usually Europe, somewhere in Europe, where they have surprising and different sorts of paintings, but also approaches to conservation. It's all part of the course if we can offer it. Next slide. In the final year, Austin's already mentioned that the wall paintings students and also the easel painting students can choose a research project, and it's normally an original piece of research, and it can be on any broad area that interests them during the course. So of course we all try and engage students in things that interest us, but students can also come towards us and say, well, look, I'm really interested in this particular artist. In this case, we have a student who went to work at the National Gallery after she graduated. Actually, she worked in the scientific department. She's a very good conservator, Gabriella Macaro, and she worked on Cézanne's card players, one version of which we have in the Courtauld. So you can look at painting techniques, you could look at the application of new analytical methods for studying paintings, you could look at philosophy, you could do a project on what is patina, so what the pictures, what's described as patination of aging. So it could be on ethics, or it could be on any kind of subject. We also have collaborations internationally where people go and work, for example, in the Netherlands, in the Cultural Heritage Agency, in collaboration with them, doing projects that interest them. So it could be on Mondrian's study of deterioration of cadmium yellow pigments in Mondrian. I'm thinking of a couple of projects this year, or the analysis of modern organic dyes using special equipment that they have, which we also will have. So we encourage these sorts of international collaborations too, which gives students a chance to broaden their perspective. Next slide. The students get a chance to present their work at international conferences, and we also encourage students to publish their work in peer-reviewed journals, and that we are quite successful at doing this, so that we aren't just being students and graduating, but we're contributing to the wider professional literature and study. So it's quite sort of, we seek to do that, to do original research that can then inform conservation in a wider sense. So this is a regular thing that's been going on since I was a student in the early 1980s. Jerry Headley, who was a very famous engineering conservator here in the department, named after him. Now it's in its 40th year almost. So students can present at the conference, which also involves the Hamilton Carr Institute in Cambridge, where they have an equivalent course, and also University of Northumbria in Newcastle, where they have a course in conservation. Next slide. And towards the end of the other project we do, of course, we are part of an incredible art history institution which specializes in the history of art. That's what it's famous for, art history and conservation. And we haven't talked about that, but we do have fantastic collaboration with the history of art. And we have a special program called Painting Pairs, Art History and Technical Study, where one of our students working on a painting in the studio pairs up with a graduate art historian who's working at the Courtauld, doing a degree either in a master's degree in any area or a PhD. And together they work looking at various historical questions where they can use technical and historical evidence. And you can look at the website here. I hope you can see the bottom of this, Painting Pairs, just a couple of examples of that from the last couple of years, looking at paintings which happen to be in the studio. Brato Sala's painting, which is actually a painting on paper, which is interesting. Of course, working on that, we've worked collaboratively with the gallery's paper conservator. And then another pair worked on a painting by Wyndham Lewis, which has another painting underneath it, a complete painting which we've managed to look at using new analytical technique, macro XRF scanning. So that's another thing. They're presentations in the research forum, but they're also recorded online. And that's something that our students have an opportunity to participate in. So next slide. So that's it. I wondered if there are any questions for us.
So I see one question in the chat.
Oh, good, you're seeing it, good. Okay.
And I just wanted to add to your the final slides, Aviva, that I believe that one of the things that we recognize is that this is an evolving field where research is a fundamental aspect of conservation work. And that's one of the reasons that it's so important that students get a taste of research from the very beginning with analytical studies, and also are able to do their own research, because research is a fundamental component of and continual learning about new ways of treatments, new ways of understanding, and analytical techniques are moving very, very fast. So it's really an exciting field. I have a question here from, I think it's Adam, about resources to learn more about the history of materials and methods in easel paintings and learn about technical analysis of paintings generally. So I would say that at the moment there is such a plethora of material online, but rather than go to online sites which haven't necessarily been peer reviewed, I would suggest that you look at publications. And there are many good publications that you can find on technical analysis. And I would nod to the National Gallery for this, both the National Gallery of Art in Washington as well as the National Gallery of Art in London, both of whom have fantastic publications on history of pigments in Washington and the history of the technical examination of paintings from the National Gallery in London. And both of those are free. And I think you can find some excellent examples. Some of them they're very well written and sophisticated analysis of paintings from the National Gallery collection in London, which gives you a broad overview of techniques as they've evolved. If you look at the early ones, you'll find techniques which we still use, and in the more recent publications, you'll find examples of analysis which are much more sophisticated. So I think that that's where I would suggest maybe Aviva can add to that.
Yeah, I mean, there are also organizations like the International Institute for Conservation, which have a conference, and you can look up those conference proceedings. And the ICOMCC, so these are two biennial and triennial conferences where they have the kind of publications, but specifically on materials and techniques. There are many, I think you're right. Starting with the technical bulletin of the National Gallery is great because they're free and online from the 70s onwards. And they show what kinds of collaborations happen between curators, scientists, and people who do conservation work of easel paintings in the National Gallery. But most of the major museums also have technical departments. And if you could look up the Kunsthistorisches Museum or other museums in the world, Madrid online, looking at the Prado, and they all have publications that talk about materials and techniques. So it is a huge field now. Starting online by Googling is a really good idea because it's quite easy to find information about materials and techniques of paintings. So it's quite fun doing that as well. Should we go into another question?
Yes, absolutely. So I'm going to answer one from Claire, Terry, about wall paintings and if we focus on gypsum as well as relief plaster. So I would say that yes and no, in the sense that a lot of the Egyptian wall paintings are on gypsum supports. So we have to be able to address the conservation of gypsum. We don't focus quite as much on decorative elements in gypsum. However, they are often part of wall painting schemes. If we think about Baroque schemes, I would say that there's a lot of information on the treatment of scagliola and other relief that you can find in specialized institutions. But I would agree with you that there isn't actually as extensive research on the treatment of unpainted gypsum. And the one thing I would also suggest is you look at the conservation of gypsum casts, because there are many casts in museums made of sculptures in gypsum, and things have happened to those casts. They've been varnished and treated and so on and so forth. But if you write to me on my email, I can send you some resources. Then I'll pass over to Aviva.
Yeah, I'm going to answer just there were quite a few questions about applications. I should say I'm not 100% sure about walls, but certainly for easel paintings conservation, you can apply with any degree. It doesn't matter what degree you have, as long as you show an interest and a commitment to studying. It's a big commitment, so you don't want to go in there and just dabble. It's a commitment to the profession, so you have to provided, you know, and if you've had a conservation degree, we do take people with conservation degrees, but of course, if you've got a degree in conservation, you need to explain why it is you want to do this course, you know, what extra it will give you. Yeah, we've taken people from all kinds of backgrounds, people who are dentists, and there's no age limit. There's no, it's not an age, you know, there's no limitations to, you can come with a history degree. We've had plenty of people with history degrees, but the important thing is to demonstrate an understanding of the area you're getting involved with and how you've managed to inform yourself about that you want to do this and that you're committed to it for 3 years at least, and you're committed to that full-time education, which is what it is. So yeah, any degree, no age range. Yep, conservation.
About another question, 2 issues. One about swapping from one course to the other. That's not possible in the sense that our courses are highly competitive. And so you can apply for all of them and see which one you get, but you can't choose to move from one to the other.
No, and I would also say that it's not to your advantage to,
No.
because you've already seen that the conservation of wall paintings involves a different kind of person, somebody who's really happy to go out in the field, in the world, and easel paintings is a rather more in studio. So that's part of informing yourself about the kind of conservator you want to be. And so if you apply for both courses, then it becomes clear that you don't really have a preference, but the lifestyle that you would have as a wall paintings conservator would be distinctively different from that you would have if you were an easel paintings person. So that's something to think about. I think it's very important to know what you want to do in life and to be committed to it. And because we only have, a few places on the course, we have 5 places a year in easels and a few more in walls, I think. It's important. We really will take people who we know are committed and who've managed to inform themselves in one way or another, either by visiting studios or thinking about it or reading in different ways to be clear about that they want to do this. Because we invest a lot of energy in educating people, so we need to know that they're committed from the beginning. So that's important to know. Yes, creative portfolio. Yes, we do. Our entry requirements for easels involves a hand skills test, so we need to know that people are not colorblind. I know that wall paintings may not be retouched, but we sometimes do retouching.
But we also have the same test for color blindness.
Yeah, we do have a similar test. So you don't want to be colorblind and have hand skills. So one of the ways of demonstrating hand skills is to show us a portfolio of work, and it can be in any media. We've had people decorating shoes and knitting. We've, people who do ordinary conventional artwork, all kinds of things. And as long as it's something that they've done that demonstrates that they're interested in using their hands and can do that and like doing it. An important part for me when I interview students is that they love the art that they're going to conserve, that they love going to galleries or looking at wall painting sites. That's what really motivates them, the idea that that they love these works, because I would not say it's the most highly paid job in the world to be an art restorer. So you have to love what you do. It's not for the money, but rather for the thing you want to do.
So I have another question of you right here about sciences. And I think you can all appreciate that science is really important for conservation, but we do not require that you have science before you come. No. Any science you have will be useful. However, from 2022 enrollments, we will be offering some science teaching before you start to give you just a refresher basics course so that we know that you all have the same knowledge about the periodic table and basic knowledge of the electromagnetic spectrum, because very quickly when you arrive, you have to start applying that knowledge to the understanding of technical analysis or the understanding of basic chemistry of solutions, and we introduce other concepts of science as we teach. So for example, how solvents behave and why it is that you choose one solvent or another and how you make that selection. Chemistry of polymers, for example, you don't need to study that beforehand, but you would be learning about that when we learn about oil paintings and the chemistry of plaster. It's very, very complicated, and that would be something that you'd be learning about in walls. So I would say that if you really, if you'd like to do some science preparation before applying, polishing up on chemistry and physics is always a good idea, but we will be offering you all that you need to know.
Okay, so there are a few more questions which I think I can answer. Here we are. Yeah, you wanted to know about a breakdown a day in life for student in conservation of easel paintings. Now, we were going to do that, but today was a kind of more general overview of all of our conservation programs, and we will be having a special open day sooner or later. Sadia will arrange it, which will tell us, in which we'll be able to tell you much more about what happens every single day in the life of year by year, how we teach and what you would expect. So I hope that you can come to that when it's advertised. It might be in October. Correct me if I'm wrong, but maybe that will be a special open day for easel painting conservation. So we'll take you blow by blow through how the course is arranged. So I could do it then. And then there was another question which I wanted to ask.
So just, I have a question here about lifestyle difference between wall paintings and easel paintings conservators. I think that what you see is what is the very typical day in a life of the training of the easel paintings conservator on this slide. You see in the studio working together with other people in the studio on easel paintings, where you are probably in London for the duration of the course, unless you have the research going. With wall painting conservation, especially in the program, half of the time will be spent on site somewhere. And we fund the site conservation projects, so you don't have to pay for your accommodation when you're in India or in China or in Malta, wherever it is we happen to go. But it means that you do need to be able to understand that if you have pets, for example, someone has to look after them. If you have a partner, that the partner needs to understand that you will not necessarily be there the whole time. If you have a young family, as I do, it's a little bit more complicated. But these are just aspects of the training that are fundamental. And there is a lifestyle difference that Aviva mentioned, just that if you really like studio work, then it's a great career. If you really like traveling and would be comfortable with moving around a little bit, then a wall paintings but they're really quite different also in terms of the approaches, large scale, scaffolding, not necessarily such much heavy lifting as thinking on a larger scale. And then you just have a slightly different approach when you're treating a painting under the microscope to that you will have with a wall painting.
There's also, Austin, there's living with other people over periods of weeks. Now, if you are, if you've got sort of 5 children, as Austin does, only 3, and I have 3, if you have children and partners or whatever, or dogs or cats, you might want to be at home and be an easel painting conservator, or you'd have to find a way of getting those people looked after. Whereas if you're a different kind of person, you might be freer to go traveling more regularly and not mind living with lots of other people who might be very annoying to you. Well, they might not be, they might be very nice. But you have to also work with, in both disciplines, you have to work with the caretakers of the works of art. So it could be the curators of a museum, if you're an easel painting conservator, or working with local people wherever you happen to be. Internationally. So all of these things need to be considered. Are you the kind of person who can do that? Are you adaptable and can live with other people? You have to think about those sorts of things when you choose a career, I think.
But I would say that in both careers, Aviva, that you have to be able to work in a team.
You do, absolutely.
Wall painting, that is essential because we're working on sites where you have potentially many people working on the same painting, but you have to be able to work in a team. If you don't like teamwork, then I don't think conservation will be for you, simply because you always have to work with other people in this field.
That's right. I'm going to answer a couple of questions about, can you do a conservation degree in 1 year? Not here is the answer. Not here. I think maybe there's a lack of clarity here about the 1 year courses. Perhaps you can reiterate that, Austin.
Yeah, that's right. We have 2 one-year degree courses, which are geared more towards technical art history on one hand, or technical study on one hand of contemporary works, which would not involve treatment. You would not be treating these paintings in the MA on the technical examination and study of contemporary works. And the Buddhist program is also, you will not be touching the paintings. You would be making recommendations regarding management, preventive conservation, but you would not be intervening physically, simply because this requires more time and more training. if you would like a career where you will be handling, touching, and fixing, restoring, and conserving paintings, you need a commitment of more time. And there's even been discussion amongst us if 3 years is enough. And 3 years is really what we think is the bare minimum amount of time to have this kind of training. Also because we owe it to the profession to educate students so that they are able to get jobs. 1-year degrees you can find in other places. You can do really fast courses, but these are not necessarily going to provide you with the skills that we feel you need to enter the profession in the UK or internationally.
I'm just picking up on a question that happened earlier. I don't want to miss out anyone's question. It was about the reintegration of the Harpsichord Lid. The consideration was the aim was to, when you view the picture, the first point was, do we accept that it's now an easel painting to be shown in a frame? And I think we agreed that it should be, and we shouldn't detach that added strip, which was added in the 18th century. We know that from pigment analysis and from looking at the pigments that were used, and also some historical documentation. But how do we acknowledge its physical history and its origins, at the same time have it readable as an image, as one image, as an easel painting? So that was a challenge that the student, and she happens to be in today, finishing that painting. So, and I've watched it as she's gone along. So that was to develop a way where the join between the two was slightly blended by retouching, but without changing, without making it completely invisible, which is possible to do. So that she came up with a very subtle way. After many trials, she came up with a very satisfactory resolution. And it's really hard for me to describe it without you seeing it. And I would underpin that, you know, what we do isn't an online type of thing. If I were to show you a photo of it, you'd get a sense of it, but you do have to see these things in person, you know, actually physically see something to really engage with it, which is why it's such a practical discipline. I hope I've described that as effectively as I can, at least the theory behind it. I've got no images to show you, but that was a good question. I didn't want it to be ignored.
So I've got some other questions about what you need to do before you do this to apply. And I think that, just to reiterate what Aviva said, in wall paintings and in easel paintings, we do not expect you to have conservation experience. If you do, you have to consider why you need to do a master's degree. If you have come from an MA in art history, like Theo wrote, you're very welcome. If you come from the natural sciences or practical art, you're very welcome. We accept that people will come with different backgrounds. And that's one of the reasons that we understand that in the education of students, that you come from quite considerably different backgrounds, different cultures, and different countries. And that's one of the real advantages. Now, both courses are highly competitive. We have many applicants to each course, and we have a yearly intake to each course. So I would say that rather than thinking about which has more applications and more places, I would really consider what you would like to do. Don't apply for a course that you don't want to do, and try to think carefully about whether or not this is a career for you, because we are considering degrees which would prepare you for a career as a professional conservator, or a degree which would prepare you perhaps for either work in an institution, or prepare you to do more study, a PhD, for example, if that's something that you wanted to do. But there are not that many jobs, so you need to be really careful about the choices that you make. And we have very good success in the graduates that we have in our programs. They all find work internationally and nationally, but that's because we are very careful in selecting people who we are convinced are committed to the profession from the beginning.
That's right. I can answer a couple of questions here. The first thing they've asked, if you've got an undergraduate degree in conservation, is the course not suitable? We do take people with all degrees, including people who've already got a conservation degree. And those people who come with a conservation degree have to explain to us why they want to do another course in conservation. In what areas do they want to develop? And they might read about the course and say, well, one of the things that we have got people who've trained, for example, in South America, who've come to us subsequently because they're interested in technical examination, which is one of our strengths, where we use a lot of technical evidence to inform our decision making, which perhaps isn't done in every course. So the opportunity to do that might be one reason, but there might be other reasons, you know, looking at a more broader approach or having a perspective that's different, and finding out about what we do is important, and how that might add to what you already know if you've already done a bachelor's in conservation. Some of the conservation bachelor's courses don't focus on easel paintings or wall paintings, but these two courses, which are 3 years, focus entirely on specializing in easel paintings or wall paintings. So you get 3 full years of practice. So these might be different reasons why people who from that background might want to do it. But there are no preferences here. It's all to do with individuals and how they present themselves at interview. Somebody else asked about frames, which is incredibly important. And of course, frames are an amazingly important part of the display of easel paintings and are not to be underestimated. But we don't restore frames. We certainly learn about frames and the history of frames, but we don't actually restore them. And yes, we do collaborate with city and guilds is the answer. For areas we don't deal with, for paper conservation, other areas, we have to rely on collaboration and drawing on the expertise of others. And that's what we do in interdisciplinary areas. And we work with city and guilds on frames. We do some on-site work too, I should say, that nobody's asked about this, but we also work on site together with city and guild students. Ooh. Are there any more questions we need to look at?
I've seen so many questions here, and I think that maybe rather than wrap up abruptly, I'd like to say to you both, it's all, you know, many people online, Aviva and I are very happy to answer specific questions, and you can contact our admissions if you have other types of questions. And some of them are going to be questions that we have often. So you might be able to figure them out if you listen again to our presentation. Other ones instead are quite specific and might be related to life in London, life at the Courtauld, and so on and so forth. I would just like to say that I would love it if you could all come and you'd all apply or visit when we're back in business in the autumn. But we don't tend to offer individual tours of the department, but we do instead invite you to the open day, which will be online. There have been questions about how we're going to operate next year with COVID and travel. I don't know. I'd hope that we could do interviews in person, but probably we would do them online. We have very successful interviews last year online, and we have a fantastic group of students. So I would say that you know, do contact us if you have specific questions that you feel that we could answer. We have questions about job prospects. We can't promise what jobs you'll find, but we can tell you that all our graduates find jobs, and sometimes very, very good jobs. We are a leading institution for conservation in the UK. It's very difficult to get a place, but once you do get a place, you are guaranteed that you have a very good education. And then job prospects will depend on the market and where you want to go and what you want to do and what you want to be. But I feel that the Courtauld gave me, and I think it gave Aviva, a very good start. So I believe that's one of our strengths. So with that, I'd like to thank everybody for being with us. We've kind of run out of time. And I'd like to invite you all to contact me or Aviva if you have specific questions, and likewise contact the admissions, PG admissions at Courtauld. We'll be taking applications for walls and easels in the autumn. So look out for the announcements, and likewise the other 2 degrees, the 1-year degree programs. And we'll be having open days in the autumn specifically about the degrees. So if you have other questions in the meantime, you might want to come back then. So thank you very much, everybody, and have a wonderful, safe, and I hope sunny summer.